Read me. Read me. Read me. Iris looked up from the book he had been reading, eyes wide and heart racing. He looked around, first at the tall bookshelves surrounding his table, then at the pile of novels beside him. He could have sworn he heard a voice. Number. It was nothing, he was just tired. Iris rubbed his eyes and yawned. How long had he been sitting there? 4 hours, according to his watch. Read me. Iris jumped up from his chair. That didn't sound like it came from his head. The voice sounded strange, not human. It sounded crackly, yet muffled. Kind of like how it sounds when you fold a piece of paper. Yes. That's what the voice sounded like, paper. Iris shook his head. He was going crazy, he knew it. He reached towards the pile of novels he had collected, rummaging through them. Every Saturday, his mother allowed him to check out 3 books from the library to read over the week. He wished he could read more, seeing as he could easily finish an entire novel in the course of 3 hours. But he had to make do with what he had, and usually read the first chapters of a few books to help him decide which ones he might like better. Iris glanced at his watch again. It was 5:30, almost time for the library to close. He had to be quick. He grabbed 3 books that were on top of the pile and was about to exit the reading corner when something caught his eye. Something golden. It was a book. A book made of what seemed like solid gold. It shone brightly, almost blinding him. His eyes burned, and he let his 3 novels slide from his grasp. Ignoring the sound of them toppling to the floor, he reached out a hand and touched the book. He wanted nothing else but to touch that shiny, smooth metal. The gold vanished under his finger in an instant. The book was now black and burnt, the cloth cover ripped and charred. Bits of it came off in black shreds as Iris picked up the heavy volume. It smelled of smoke, as well as something metallic and sharp. Blood? Why would a book smell like blood? Iris coughed slightly and brushed away a few more pieces of cracked cloth so he could read the title, Tales of Absinthe Valve and Blackheart. Absinthe Valve and Blackheart? Who was that? Read me. Read me. Read me. Iris stifled a gasp and dropped the book, or, at least, he tried to. The book was stuck to his hands, the cloth seeping into his skin, as it was now a part of his body instead of a book falling apart in ashes. Iris's breathing became heavy. He ran over to the bookshelf and slammed his hands against it, but the book only stuck stronger. His hands shaking with pain and fear, he took a deep breath and looked at the book sternly. "What are you doing?" he whispered, terrified. "Read me." A frightened tear rolled down Iris's cheek. With his hands bound to the book, he couldn't brush it away. He didn't understand what was happening. He didn't even understand why it was happening. Was this a prank? Had someone put this book in his pile when he wasn't looking, stuck glue on it, and was uttering those strange voices while they watched him struggle? No, that wasn't right. He was respected at school, though mostly ignored. Nobody bothered him, and he didn't bother anybody in return. He didn't have any friends who would want to do such a thing to him. They knew how much he hated things like this. "Read me." "Fine." Iris hissed, desperate to get the book off his hands. "Fine, I'll read you if you let me go. Please." In response, the book swung open in Iris's hands. Hopeful, he tried shaking it off, but it was no use. Sighing, he glanced at the first page and began to read. To all those who have suffered at Absinthe Valve and Blackheart's hand. Casper. Felix. Alexander. Robinson. Elliot A. Elliot B. Iris. Iris's heart seemed to stop. He turned the page, not by choice but by instinct, as if his hand was more in control than his brain was. "The needle shall cause pain, and you will suffer absinthe's pain. The choice is yours. Will you speak here, or is your voice too hoarse? A single uttered word will cause your ending. This book is for anything but lending. If it opens in your hands, it means more misery than you will possibly understand. I'm sorry, my friend. I hope your time on Earth was well spent. You should have not talked in the library, because surviving the incident is a true rarity. The book dropped from Iris's hands the second he read the last word. Rarity. The black volume fell on the floor with a dull thunk, echoing throughout the whole room, so loud that Iris had to cover his ears to block out the sound. The air became chilly. So chilly. Iris couldn't feel his own hands, they felt as if they were gone. He was so cold, he felt immobilized, unable to speak. The edge of his vision turned blurry. It was getting dark. He heard footsteps. Then he saw it. A girl. A girl with ragged, black hair and a stained nightgown. She pushed the table aside as if it were as light as a feather and stepped in front of Iris. He couldn't see her face, it was covered by bangs so greasy that oil could have dripped from them. His bones were freezing. His mind was freezing. Iris couldn't do anything but stare, horrified, at the girl. Fear pulsed through his brain. She reached a hand down her front and pulled out a long black needle that glinted dangerously. The only part of Iris moving was his heart, pounding relentlessly against his chest. The girl raised the needle. She lunged. Do not talk in the library. Halloween is easily the best holiday. There is something about it. Maybe that she didn't feel like as much of a freak as she did every other day of the year. This day alone was when the freaks could come out and play, being revered instead of feared. Maybe that was it. But there was also this unidentifiable magic associated with the day that allowed the dead to be just a bit closer to people. She had always loved the holiday but never participated. She was a foreigner in America, and this dress-up holiday was all new to her. She couldn't wait. She sat in front of her vanity mirror on All Hallows Eve and mixed her paints and tints. Her makeup was grotesquely exaggerated. Her eyes were huge and her face grey and worn-looking. She was transforming into a spectacular ghost. She could already imagine the horrified reactions, and a smile cracked upon her face. The screams and running. Oh, how delicious. She couldn't exactly pinpoint why she enjoyed spreading fear and seeing the discomfort of others. She simply had always been that way, enjoying observing what scared others. When her makeup was done, she put on a wispy white lace dress. It billowed easily with the slightest breeze of wind. Hauntingly she could walk and appear to be floating creepily at others. Her grin cracked again at the thought. Then she sat and wait. There was nothing else to do but wait until the time of the party. The party she had always wanted to attend. A monster bash ball she used to watch on TV in her native land. Her time had come to scare them all, the best scare of all the balls. The time was 11:11 p.m. as she walked through the double doors that looked like they were made for giants. The people filed in, if you could call them that. All the freaks and monsters filed into the ballroom. No one paid her any mind. She was just one of the many, another ghoul. At first, she watched from the side as people paired off and approached the dance floor to shake, rattle, and roll to the beats. It was all pretty uninspired up close. They had made it look so cool on TV. Now instead, she was only feeling a mounting need for something out of the ordinary to occur, something spectacular. And since no one ever provides these things in life, she would resort to fulfilling the need herself. That was what life had taught her. Do it yourself. She walked purposefully through the crowd without a break in her gliding gait. Reaching the stage, she stood before the mass of humans, looking down on them from her elevated position. Her grin was in place again. She began to cackle loudly, and no one looked up. As she laughed, she realized this and stopped short. She walked over to the guitar player next to her, and he never broke rhythm. She was standing right next to him, moved her face an inch away from his, and still, he did not even register her face. What's going on? Can no one see me? She said this aloud, and her voice carried away with the wind. Gone, unnoticed. She backed away, and then looking out at the crowd again, made a reckless decision. Taking a running start, she hurled herself from the stage and into the mass of people. She would make them notice her. She was falling through the air, about to crash into a man dressed as a dragon, but she just kept falling, crashing onto the floor. The fall didn't hurt. How? What was this? None of it was adding up. Standing abruptly, she swiped her hand at a vampire trying to hit her, and her hand went through the vampire girl, never affecting her at all. No, it couldn't be true. She knew it was. She had avoided it for so long, to the point where she believed it, that she was real. She had believed it to the point of doing this prank, the goal she had had in life that was unattainable now. Or was it? Angrily, she grabbed a punch bowl and lifted it above her head. The people nearest saw it rise on its own accord and come crashing down on Mickey Mouse's head. What was that? Shrieked someone. This place is haunted, said another. Happy Halloween, said the ghost with her grin as she glided away. She left the shrieking in her midst and returned to the darkness of the night. The moon was high and full in the sky with grey ominous clouds streaking the blackness. Each character from each story of all of a time passed by her as she floated down the street. It was past the time for trick-or-treaters. She was glad. All of her memories were coming back to her. The memories of her life, the life before death. They were flashing quickly like a picture slideshow. Her life in Croatia as a wife with 3 children. Her obsession as a small girl to see the US and understand what made it what it was to people. The curiosity that led her to come here, not in life, but to float across the sea in death. And then, somehow to forget everything she had been. How can one forget so fully who they once were, and feel nothing but sadness at that knowledge that she didn't miss that life? She simply had forgotten it to live a new life that went unrequited when living. So now she was alive in a new way, a way that was detached and ensured she could do what she wanted. But she would be alone, always, forever. And that was the scariest thought of all. With nothing to be done about it, the ghost carried on silently to find another thrill to distract her solitary soul. Faintly, a sort of wailing could be heard that mixed with the wind. The only sound that she would ever emanate for the rest of time. Daisy was sitting in her bedroom reading a horror novel. It was nighttime. She looked outside the window. It was a full moon. It was looking so lovely. A few dark clouds could also be seen in front of it. It looked like it would raining anytime soon. Cold wind was blowing. Suddenly her mobile rang. She picked up. It was her friend Betty. Hey Daisy, the local club is sponsoring a dare event in which you have to enter the abandoned supposedly haunted fort of Riverdale at midnight, Betty said. Oh my god, that's scary, said Daisy. Come on, don't be a nincompoop, it's worth $2,000 prize money. Don't tell me you are scared and believe in stupid ghosts, Betty said. But then too, you know, Betty, it's a dangerous place. Some legends and stories are associated with it. Some evil spirit lurks there, all old men say. We should not disregard this for some contest, Daisy told Betty over the phone. Listen, if you win you get $2,000, that's a lot of money. If you don't get scholarship this year, then this money you can use for your lawyer college fees, Betty said. Okay, so what I have to do, asked Daisy. Daisy had a bad feeling about this, but she was in two minds and needed the money. Meet me at the college grounds. There will be a group there of people who are participating. Line by line we have to go up, Betty told Daisy. Okay, I'm meeting you at 12 o'clock now. I'm coming to see you at the grounds, said Betty and rushed to collect her coat as it was a chill night. Okay Mom, I'm going, Daisy told her mother. Where you going at this time of night, her mother asked. Betty told me about some dare contest on that abandoned fort. One has to go to the top and come back at my dinghy. It's a life and death contest stake and I'm participating in it for the prize money, Daisy told her mother. Don't be a fool, child, it's not some rumor. That fort is truly haunted. Just go to sleep. Don't play with such things, her mother warned her. But Mum, other people would be there too, and what if I succeed in going up? Then the money's mine, Daisy argued. But inside that dark fort in middle of the night you'll be alone with no one to help or hear you. Remember this, her mother said. Don't worry, nothing will happen, I'm going, Daisy said and ran. After reaching the grounds she saw a group of only 4 people. All of them looked like a very bad idea to Daisy. Betty came running towards her. I knew you would come. come. The contest will start now, Betty said. The contest started. First blonde guy went up the fort. All of them waited for him to come back. After 10 minutes, he returned. What happened? Asked the tattooed head. It's too scary, I just could not build up the courage to go up, the blonde guy said. Now it was Daisy's turn to go up. See, it was easy, I told you, Betty told Daisy. Are you mad? That guy just returned saying he did not found it safe to go up. And look at the time, it's midnight. At this time all paranormal activities start, you know that, okay, Daisy shouted. The tattooed head of the contest came towards Daisy and said, so I hope you are going up, it's you next. It was 12:30 in the night. The head of the group again told Daisy, now it's your turn to go up and all the best, and Daisy started walking slowly towards the fort. She was in a dazed stupor of fright. The daunting fort was looking so spooky and forbidding. Her body was full of goosebumps and she started shivering. This was not such a good idea, Daisy thought. But it was too late now to return back. Slowly she started walking with the flashlight in her hand. Suddenly she heard a sound of a faint sinister laughter. Daisy thought of running back but was too scared to do that too now. So she kept climbing. When she reached the first floor, only 2 more floors were there. Oh no, I miss my mother and Betty. What did I got myself into? This horrible life and death dare contest. I should not have listened to silly Betty, Daisy said. She felt so alone and cold in the dark there. Not to mistake the presence of someone following her up the stairs. Daisy started trembling out of fear. But then she saw a huge black shadow. It was real, not her imagination. It was coming towards her, and when it reached her, what Daisy saw made her heart stop and she fell down. The contest crew were waiting down. It was more than 2 hours and there was no sign of Daisy, so they all rushed inside and saw Daisy lying on the floor with her wide eyes open. Betty started screaming, she's dead. She must have encountered that ghost here. Wait a minute, I hear some pulse, she's just unconscious, the head said, and they took her out. The head of the contest said, thank God we got a sign of never playing such daring contest on such haunted sites. And we will stick to it. Let's always play safe and good games. Who knows what exactly Daisy saw up the which made her lose consciousness. Let's take her to the hospital, all will be alright, okay? And who's her friend here, he asked. Betty came forward. She was crying, this was all my fault, I should not have told her to enter this contest. Only Betty said. The head told inform her mother and don't blame itself. She will be fine. While all this was happening, from the fort window a tall black shadow of a man was looking out at them with a maniacal smile on his face. Sina and I unrolled our sleeping bags on October 31st, 2013, a few hours before midnight. It was cold and dark, despite what the forecast had been, but we had come prepared with extra blankets, sweaters, and hot cocoa in a little travel cup. It was Sina's brother who had dared us to spend the night here, in the graveyard. I was glad I agreed, it beat trick-or-treating by a lot, especially since everyone was selling candy for lower prices anyways. Sitting there, talking with my best friend, the leaves falling around us as the temperature gradually fell a broken bar. It was amazing. The clock tower struck midnight, and we turned off the flashlights on our phones. I lay down and looked at the moonlight shining on the gravestones, illuminating the names. Hey, I dare you to balance on one of these without falling, I told Sina. I'll take a photo as proof that we did this. Good call. Okay. Which dead guy's memorial am I gonna balance on? We both laughed at the sheer darkness of that statement before she finally decided on someone named Nitas Riveroff. His grave looked pretty sturdy. The wind whistled in my ear as Sina struck a pose and I snapped a picture. The flash shined off of the gravestones nearby, and shined in Sina's eyes. It shined off of a figure on the path. Is someone there? I called, turning on the flashlight on my phone and shining it on the path. But there was no response. No person. Nothing. I think it was just a trick of the light, Sina said with a smile, standing on one foot. Or can you see ghosts now? I can see the headlines now. Aim the ghost whisperer. I shot her a glare that I hoped she could see despite the growing darkness. I looked up, watching as a cloud covered up more and more of the moon. I shivered. Sina hopped off of the gravestone, and I decided to take a selfie to prove I did this. 2. Sina's the type of person that would probably claim that she was here on her own, and if I didn't have proof, I'd lose my share of the bet. I kneeled next to the memorial and pressed a button on my phone. The camera flipped around, and I saw my shadow in the background. It was creepy. The phone looked like a knife in my hand, and my body looked like a man hunched over instead of a 14-year-old girl taking a picture. It looked like the figure I thought I saw on the path. My mind silently whispered for me to run, but I shook my head and took the photo. The flash went off directly in my eyes, and I flinched. My eyes flew shut, and I felt something brush my neck. I opened my eyes, whirling around, but there was nothing. "It's a ghost," Sina taunted. "Oh, shut up." I took a deep breath. It was probably a leaf, or a bug, or maybe even just the wind. I took the photo again, forcing my eyes to stay open. I looked at the images. Sina's face was almost impossible to see. She was silhouetted in the moonlight, even though I could have sworn the flash had been on. I swiped to the selfie and saw the same problem. Hey, am I going crazy, or did I use flash when I took those photos? Silence. I clicked off my phone. Sina. The wind whistled louder and I felt a raindrop on my head. It was dark enough that I could barely see. Sina, come on, this isn't funny. I tapped my phone, but instead of turning on, I saw the no battery screen. It was at 70%. A broken bar. Sina, is your phone working? I can't see a thing out here. I shivered as another gust of wind blew by and rain began to fall. I walked back to the sleeping bags and felt around for the hot cocoa. Okay, I whispered as I found the cup, my fingers freezing in the cold night air. I'm fine. This is real life. Sina's playing a trick on you. It's just cold. This is all okay. For the first time, I longed for the moment where Sina jumped out of the shadows and laughed at her cruel joke. You're going to be fine. Fine, fine, fine. My voice echoed as the dark became even more unbearable. You're going to be fine. Who's the? ? Silence. I frantically tapped my phone screen, desperate for light of any kind. I looked up at the sky, but there was no moon to be seen. The clouds had completely covered it up, and all of the streetlights were out. Sina, I'm going to drink all of the hot cocoa, I said. Sina would kill for hot cocoa any day. If that didn't make her respond, nothing would. I heard behind me. I whirled around, but only saw Nata's Riveroff's grave. The rain began to pour harder and harder. Sina. What have you done with Sina? ? My phone suddenly clicked on and showed the selfie, but the lighting was different. I was able to see my face, and the words on the grave. A broken bar, but the words shifted into a different order, a reversed order. I saw what Nata's Riveroff really said before my phone clicked off. For the last time. I ran, so scared that I couldn't even scream. I didn't know where Sina was, but me yelling wasn't going to bring her back. Tears rolled down my face as it dawned on me that one of my best friends was most likely dead. A broken bar, and I was most likely about to die. It was so dark that I tripped over everything from loose bricks on the path to entire gravestones, but I made it to the fence. The exit. I scrambled up the fence, but slipped on the rain-slick bars of the metal. My hands were so cold and numb, they couldn't grip onto anything. I'm going to die, I realized. Fine, 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 the voice insisted. But it wasn't an echo. It was a different voice than mine, dark and raspy. Hello? ? You're going to be fine. And the last thing I felt was a hand on my shoulder. It was a stormy night, and Grace, a young woman in her mid-20s, found herself alone in her old, inherited mansion. As the rain poured down in torrents and the wind howled, she decided to explore the basement, a part of the house she had always been curious about but had never dared to venture into. Armed with only a flashlight, Grace descended into the dark, cobweb-filled basement. The air was musty, and the walls were lined with ancient shelves covered in dust and decayed books. As she cautiously made her way through the labyrinth of corridors, she heard faint whispers echoing in the distance, sending shivers down her spine. Ignoring her growing unease, Grace followed the whispers, which seemed to grow louder the deeper she delved into the basement. She reached a hidden door, barely visible behind a pile of rubble. With trembling hands, she pushed it open, revealing a secret chamber adorned with sinister symbols and an altar in the center. Before she could react, Grace felt a chilling presence behind her. She turned around to find a group of ghostly figures, dressed in tattered robes, surrounding her. Their eyes were hollow, and their mouths moved as if trying to speak, but no sound came out. Grace's heart pounded as she realized she had stumbled upon an ancient cult that had practiced dark rituals in her own home. Panicking, Grace tried to flee, but the basement seemed to have transformed into a nightmarish maze, with shifting walls and endless corridors that led her back to the same spot. Desperate to escape, she frantically searched for a way out, but the spirits were relentless in their pursuit. As she continued to navigate the eerie labyrinth, Grace uncovered disturbing secrets about her family's history. She learned that her ancestors had been part of the cult, performing heinous rituals to gain power and immortality. The spirits of the cult members, trapped in the basement, were now seeking revenge on Grace for her family's sins. With time running out and her sanity fraying, Grace faced terrifying obstacles, including ghastly apparitions, booby traps, and hallucinations that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. She realized that the only way to break the curse and escape the basement was to confront her family's dark legacy and atone for their sins. As the storm outside raged on, Grace finally managed to perform a ritual to appease the vengeful spirits and break the curse. The basement returned to its normal state, and she emerged, exhausted and traumatized but free from the malevolent presence. As Grace stepped out of the mansion, she watched in horror as the ancient building crumbled into rubble, erasing all traces of the cult's existence. She realized that she had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death and that the dark secrets of her family's past would haunt her forever. From that day on, Grace swore never to speak of what happened in the basement, but she could still hear faint echoes of whispers in her mind, a chilling reminder of the horrors she had witnessed in the depths of her own home. Once upon a time, in a small, remote cabin deep in the woods, there lived a hermit named Samuel. Samuel was known to be eccentric and reclusive, rarely leaving his cabin except to gather supplies from the nearby village. One stormy night, as the wind howled and rain poured down in torrents, Samuel heard a strange tapping on his door. He cautiously opened it, but no one was there. Just as he was about to close the door, he caught a glimpse of movement out of the corner of his eye. He turned around to see a figure in a tattered, hooded cloak disappearing into the darkness. Feeling unsettled, Samuel closed the door and locked it, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over him. But as the night wore on, he began to hear strange noises. Whispers echoed through the cabin, and he caught glimpses of shadowy figures darting in and out of his peripheral vision. The next morning, Samuel ventured outside to investigate, but found no footprints or any signs of human presence. He tried to convince himself that it was just his imagination playing tricks on him, but the strange occurrences continued. Objects would move on their own, doors would open and close by themselves, and eerie laughter would echo through the cabin at night. Samuel's once peaceful life turned into a living nightmare. He became sleep-deprived, paranoid, and terrified to be alone in his own home. He tried to seek help from the villagers, but they simply shook their heads and muttered about the cabin being cursed. One night, as Samuel lay awake in bed, he heard a scratching sound coming from the walls. He followed the sound, and it led him to a hidden trapdoor in the floor. With trembling hands, he opened it, and to his horror, he found a secret chamber filled with old, decaying corpses. Their empty eyes seemed to stare accusingly at him, and their skeletal fingers pointed towards him. Before Samuel could react, the door slammed shut behind him, trapping him inside. He screamed for help, but his cries were met with only silence. He tried to escape, but the walls seemed to close in on him, and the air grew suffocating. Desperate and terrified, Samuel succumbed to madness, his screams echoing through the woods as the cabin seemed to swallow him whole. From that day on, the cabin was avoided by everyone in the village. Some claimed to hear Samuel's tormented screams on stormy nights, while others swore they saw a hooded figure lurking in the shadows. The cabin remained abandoned, a chilling reminder of the horror that had unfolded within its walls, and a cautionary tale for anyone who dared to venture too close. In a small town nestled in the woods, there was a quaint little antique shop run by an elderly woman named Agnes. She had a vast collection of unique and eerie items, but there was one that stood out among the rest, a porcelain doll with hauntingly realistic blue eyes. Agnes had acquired the doll from an estate sale many years ago, but she could never bring herself to sell it. She had heard rumors of its dark history, and some said it was cursed. However, Agnes dismissed these claims as mere superstitions. One day, a young woman named Emily entered the shop. She was drawn to the doll's piercing blue eyes and decided to purchase it, despite Agnes' warning that it might not be a good idea. Emily was captivated by the doll's beauty and took it home with her. That night, as Emily lay in bed, she heard faint giggling coming from the doll. She dismissed it as her imagination, but the next day, she found the doll in a different spot from where she had left it. Emily brushed it off, thinking she must have moved it herself in her sleep. But as days went by, strange occurrences became more frequent. Emily would hear the doll giggling at night, and sometimes she would find it in different rooms of her house, facing her with its unblinking blue eyes. Emily's once peaceful home became filled with an eerie atmosphere. She began having vivid nightmares, and her health started to decline. She couldn't explain the unsettling feeling that the doll was watching her. One night, Emily woke up to find the doll sitting at the edge of her bed, staring at her with a malevolent grin. Terrified, she grabbed the doll and threw it into a box, locking it away in her basement. But the doll's presence continued to haunt Emily. She would hear its laughter echoing through the house, and sometimes she would catch glimpses of its shadow lurking in the corners of her vision. Unable to bear it any longer, Emily decided to return the doll to Agnes' shop. As she handed it back to the old woman, Agnes looked at her with a knowing gaze and told her that the doll had a dark past. Legend had it that the doll was possessed by the spirit of a little girl who had died tragically many years ago. The doll had been passed down through generations, bringing misfortune to anyone who possessed it. Emily left the shop, relieved to be rid of the doll, but she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was being watched. As she walked home, she glanced back at the shop window, and there, staring out at her with its piercing blue eyes, was the haunted doll, grinning wickedly. It was the 26th of October in 2007 and a week before Halloween. Me, Mikhail, James, Ryan, and Joe were excited and were planning what we were going to do this Halloween. My friend James suggested that we should throw toilet paper on the trees like last year. I told him we do that every year and we should do something different this year. My brother Ryan suggested we should go to the house on 33 Street. The house on 33 Street is abandoned, old, worn out, and sitting on top of a tall hill in Caliente, Nevada. The hill was about 35 feet tall. I told him we shouldn't go because there were lots of rumors going on about the missing kid who was last seen on 33 Street last Halloween. Everyone started calling me a scaredy cat. I said, I'm not scared and I'll go there at midnight with you guys. Then my mum told me it was bedtime so my friends have to leave. We all said our goodbyes. The night before Halloween I sneaked out and went to 33 Street to see the abandoned house. I was examining the house very carefully and spotted red eyes. I rubbed my eyes and the eyes I saw were gone. Then all of a sudden I heard screaming and ran back home, almost crying about what I had witnessed. My friends come over around 8 p.m. and we all headed out for trick-or-treating. James and my other friends said let's go to the house on 33rd Street. Ryan replied, not yet, the best for last. We all agreed that we should go to the house on 33 Street last. It was 2 a.m. I was tired. My friends were tired and I thought we all forgot about the abandoned. We were about to go back home until my friends saw the house and said that we were supposed to go to that house. I said that we all are tired and we should go next Halloween and my friends started to laugh. What's so funny? I asked. They said we knew you would be scared to go to the house. Scaredy cat. I chuckled. No, I'm not scared, it's just I'm tired. My friends ignored what I said and hiked up the hill. After we got to the top we took a candy break. Hey, guys, let's make this quick because it's getting late, I said. They ignored me again and knocked on the door and said, trick or treat. An old lady with a black mask opened the door. I tried to see her actual identity but she covered it pretty well. She was about 4 feet tall and had a black dress that looked like it was made of rubber. Something was strange. I told my friends to huddle and they asked what happened. I said I'm not very sure about it because the old lady seemed a bit off. They laughed and said stop being a chicken. I said no, it's not a good idea and it wasn't even safe to enter a random person's house. My friends called me losers and told me that you weren't as cool as they thought. Luckily they managed to listen to me and headed back to the house. The old lady didn't seem so happy and he headed back home and the lady said to have a good trick or treat and I smiled back and said you too. I was so relieved and told my friends about the things I had witnessed. Then after Halloween strange things were happening. My parents lost their jobs and we had to move to a small apartment but luckily it was near my old home. I was late for class and I did not see a puddle ahead of me and I tried and fell into it. Everyone in my school started to laugh at me. Then I went into class and my teacher seemed pretty happy. He said we have a field trip today and I told my teacher that I did not know that we had a field trip today. He said, they always say, you snooze you lose. I got mad and was sent to another classroom for the rest of the day. I was sent to my least favorite class since my teacher said, you can sit in the back and do your work. I silently mocked her and the games were blocked and so was YouTube. I was wondering why I was having such bad luck. I didn't walk under a ladder. I didn't look into black cat's eyes. Then what else could there be? I shrugged it. Maybe it was a bad day so I went back home and I say my mom was making something. I was happy and I was hoping she made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I came inside and asked my mom what she was making and she said a plain old ham sandwich. I said, I'll skip and have some milk. She poured the milk for me and I went to do some homework. I touched the bottom of the bag, and it was wet. I looked inside of my bag and my water bottle was opened. I called my friends. I asked how they were and they all said the same thing. Yeah, I'm doing good. Why? I explained what was happening to me but I didn't know what was happening. I woke up the next morning feeling like today was going to be better. I looked at the time and it was 8:45 a.m. And I realized I was late for school and ran out of bed and got ready and told my mom to drop me off. It was quiet but I didn't really mind it. I made it to my class but the lights were off and there was no sound or anything. I banged on the door and there was no answer so I was about to head to the office until I heard gunshots and someone screaming. I freaked out and ran into the bathroom and closed the doors. The madman banged on the door and begged to open the door. I felt like it was a miracle that I closed the main door or I would be dead. The police arrested the man and everyone was sent home early. I ran to the abandoned house and started to bang on the doors and an old lady with a mask opened the door. I dropped to my knees and asked her why I had such bad luck and I started to cry. She said, this is Caliente, Nevada, and then the old lady grabs me by the shirt and pulls me into the house. A few days later a historical event happens that I will never forget. I woke up on the floor, inside of a jail cell at midnight. I pulled out my phone and see the same mysterious old lady with the same black mask. She opens the jail cell and I hit her in the face and pull off her mask and films her face. She becomes angry and pulls out a knife. I pray to God to help me and I see a tunnel and run towards it. I ran down the tunnel and when I reached the end of the tunnel were lots of cops and I run towards the cops. I thanked God and showed the police my footage and the cops went on the search for 3 hours and couldn't find the lady. I don't know where the lady is and I really don't care where the lady is because everything is back to normal and the house is closed down. I'm 21 now and it feels like it was yesterday. She vomited up salty water as she pulled herself out of the freezing ocean and onto a rock, the sharp edges tearing at her bare skin as she gripped on with numb fingers. She took a shuddering breath. the cold air rattling through her burning lungs. The stars looked coldly down upon her, their brightness as fragile and weak as her failing body. "It's bad luck," the captain said. "Bad luck sailing at night with a woman on board." She used her feet to leverage herself further onto the rock, her chest scraping painfully, causing thin tendrils of blood to slide down her stomach. "What can we do, Cap? We can't just throw her overboard." She'd sat, huddled silently behind the brutish men, gag in her mouth. They were all pressed together tightly aboard a ship, the warm tendrils of dusk seeping everything in a gentle gold. The dull ache of dread sat low in her stomach. She knew the captain had already made up his mind. "We must." Everyone began talking at once, throwing up their hands in uproar. The captain silenced them all with one look. "The night spirits will kill us all if we don't." Bile rose in her stomach again, and she spat it out against the rock. Everyone knew of the night spirits. They were every child's bedtime story. Wailing women, they were called, drowning every sailor who came across their path. Anytime they knew a woman was on the ship, they would hunt them out, changing the tides and causing storms, manipulating the fabric of the darkness until it shrouded every living thing in the ocean. It killed all the men, and the women were never found again. The ships always found their way back to the shore, guided as if by ghosts, the gentle bobbing of the ship revealing nothing of the horrors within. They would gently bump onto the sand, and the village would run to sea, only to be greeted with the stench of salty blood. Every man's throat slit. "No women on ships," everyone would say. "No women on ships. Too dangerous for everyone. No women on ships." It was almost an old wives' tale, repeated so many times that whenever the warning was given, people just rolled their eyes. But no one doubted that it was true. They stripped her of her clothes, pulling at her shirt and skirt viciously. No reason for gentleness, no reason for care. She'd be dead soon anyway. Dead for the benefit of the crew. One of the taller men pulled at her wrists, untying the tight ropes they had knotted to make her comply. She stood limply as they loosened, knowing there was no point in fighting. There were at least 20 strong men surrounding her, keeping guard, all of their muscle and weapons, and yet she was the most dangerous thing on board. She would never have risked it normally. She knew the stories, like everyone else. She knew that even if the spirits didn't kill her, the captain would. But she had to get away from him. He followed her everywhere, leering at her with that snake smile, never giving her a moment's peace. She'd said no more times than she could count, practically begging him to leave her alone, but every time he just whispered in her ear, telling her she was his. The thought made her vomit up even more salty water. She had to get away. She was sure that he would kill her if she said no one more time. She thought, maybe, if she hid from the crew, she could also hide from the spirits. Or perhaps it was the other way around. As she bled onto the rock, the salt in her mouth from the sea and her tears, she didn't know which one was more dangerous. "I'm sorry," the captain said, and that is when anger flared in her chest. He was a cruel coward, and if he was going to kill her, he might as well be strong in his decision. She turned her head, and spat at him. "Don't you dare apologize to me," she said, her voice as icy cold as the freezing depths below. "You don't deserve the privilege of being sorry." The captain had looked shocked, for a moment, and then had frowned. Push her overboard. It had been stupidly easy to sneak onto the ship. Men, especially arrogant men, were easy to fool. It was the ship's dog that had given her away, sniffing and whining at her spot behind the barrels until someone thought to come check. They'd hauled her by the back of her shirt, and she'd known immediately she was done for. Her body plunged into the icy depths, the freezing water 1,000 needles on her skin. She screamed, then stopped, desperate to conserve every bit of her energy. She pulled herself to the surface quickly, gasping, but wave after wave pushed her down. She swam up and up and up, the salt stinging her eyes, praying to whoever, whatever, to come save her. She was going to die here. She was going to die. Her fingers brushed against a rock. Even as she sat, half out of the ocean, she knew her time was limited. She felt nothing but pure rage coursing through her veins at the injustice of it all, her heart pumping in her ears as she let out a vicious scream. Wouldn't it be nice? The wind said to her, tickling the back of her ear. Wouldn't it be nice to get revenge? To fight back? Wouldn't it be nice to prove them right? Yes, she spat, her fingers tightening. Yes. Do you want it? Yes. She screamed. Yes. Her body twisted and turned as she left the cold of the water behind, her mind warping and growing and joining the other women cast out to sea. Her body was their body. She was they. They wailed, a mouth full of sharp teeth, eyes becoming slits and nails becoming claws. They wailed, and wailed, and wailed, no longer in pain but in anger. The darkness beckoned them, with the moon as their sisters. The stars that were cold in the sky shone bright for them, strong as their sisterhood, and as they looked up into the expanse of the night, they smiled. There would be blood spilt tonight. On Halloween night, a group of teenagers decided to explore an abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town. The building had been closed for years, but rumors circulated that strange things still happened within its walls. As they approached the building, they could hear the sound of doors slamming shut and footsteps echoing through the halls, despite the fact that the building was supposed to be empty. But the teenagers were undaunted and ventured inside. As they made their way through the dark, shadowy halls, they began to hear whispers and giggles. The sound seemed to be coming from all around them, but whenever they turned to look, they saw nothing but empty rooms and dark corners. Suddenly, they heard a blood-gurgling scream. One of the teenagers had stumbled upon a room filled with twisted, mangled bodies. The corpses were fresh, their eyes open in a silent scream, and their limbs contorted at impossible angles. The teenagers tried to flee, but the doors were all locked. They were trapped inside with whatever had killed the people in the room. And then they saw it, a figure shrouded in darkness, with glowing red eyes and a twisted grin. It slowly made its way towards them, its fingers curling into claws. The teenagers huddled together, their hearts pounding with fear as the figure drew closer and closer. They knew that they were facing something truly evil, something that they could not possibly defeat. And as the figure loomed over them, they could hear the sound of laughter echoing through the halls. A cold, heartless sound that chilled them to the bone. Once upon a time, in a remote village in Ireland, there lived a man named Sean who had heard stories about a mischievous and dangerous creature known as a leprechaun. He had always dismissed these tales as mere superstition, until one fateful day when he encountered one himself. Sean was out walking in the countryside when he stumbled upon a small, ragged-looking man with a pointed hat and a wicked grin. The man introduced himself as a leprechaun, and Sean couldn't believe his eyes. He had always thought leprechauns were nothing more than a fairy tale, but there was no mistaking the sly glint in the creature's eye. The leprechaun told Sean that he was in possession of a pot of gold, and that he would be willing to share it with him if he could catch him. Sean laughed at the idea, thinking it was just a harmless game. But soon he realized that he was in grave danger. The leprechaun was fast and cunning, darting in and out of the bushes and leading Sean on a wild chase through the woods. As they ran, Sean noticed that the leprechaun seemed to be getting stronger, and his eyes glowed with a sinister light. Finally, Sean was able to grab the leprechaun by the arm and demand the gold. But as soon as he touched the creature, he felt a sharp pain in his hand, and he knew that he had made a grave mistake. The leprechaun cackled with delight as Sean felt his body growing weaker and weaker, until he collapsed on the ground. In the end, the leprechaun made off with his pot of gold, leaving Sean to die in the woods. The villagers whispered that he had been cursed by the leprechaun, and that he had paid the ultimate price for his greed. And to this day, no one in that village dares to mess with the mischievous and malevolent leprechauns. I thought Jason was mad. But I was wrong. I was mad. Mad to get imprisoned in this library. It started like this. To ring. To ring. To ring. My phone was ringing. With sleepy eyes, I turned back and took a look at the clock. Damn. It was 11 p.m. I attended the call. The voice shouted, "Hey, it's me, Jason. Why did you call now?" I asked him sleepily. He answered, "I have to submit the library book, Drake. Its due date is today. Are you met? At 11 p.m. Please, Drake." And that sentence did something to me. "Okay, I'll come to your house now." "I'm standing in front of your house, Drake." I hung up the call, put on my mask and slowly tiptoed on the stairs, hoping my parents won't wake up. I looked at their locked room and sprinted to Jason. He looked sober and his blue eyes glittered in the night. "You look sleepy," he said. "Ah, at 11 p.m. everyone looks sleepy." I gave him an annoyed look and he turned his face to the other side. "Okay. Chill." He puts his strong forearms on my shoulder. Then only it hits. "Jason, do you know what day is today?" He thought for a while. "Oh, man. Magic day. Anything can happen to us. The roads, trees can behave weirdly and people have no guarantee of their life today." We sat down and made a decision. "We are going, whatever it takes," he said and stood up. I regretted being his friend. We started our dangerous journey, holding our hands together. "Is submitting this book really necessary?" I asked him, expecting a no as a reply. "Yes. I have to submit it today," he said, breaking all my hopes. Jason stopped me on my path. A whirlpool on the road. There were many whirlpools, all over the road. "Do you still think we should continue?" I asked him. "We are submitting the book, for sure." He stressed on the book a lot. We took our steps carefully, and who would want to lose their lives for submitting a library book? His backpack slided and fell into a whirlpool. Jason would have jumped too, but I caught hold of him. "No," he shouted at the top of his voice. "Idiot, it's just a backpack. Don't risk your life for it," I said, keeping him in my grip. "The book is in that backpack. Calm down, Jason." I patted his back. He was short-tempered. The bag flew out from another whirlpool. I opened my mouth in awe. Whirlpools always suck in, but this whirlpool threw it out. Jason ran to the bag. Man, he was relieved. As much short-tempered, he loved having fun. He jumped into one whirlpool and came out of another. He signaled his hands to me. "No thanks." We continued our journey. The night was filled with wonders. This time, I stopped him on his path. The ground was cracked. There was no road in the middle. We carefully walked in the sides. We panted and took long breaths. Then we heard a siren. "Police are standing there, Jason," I alerted him. "We should go to the library, we are almost there." The library was in our sight, but the police stood between us and the library. "It's locked down today. We shouldn't come out at this hour of night," I stated the facts to him. "Look there," he shouted, and I ducked. Stones were flying around the place. We ran and hid behind a tree. We had to plan an escape. Jason gave a wild grin to me. He signaled me to look down. The roots of the tree were loose in the ground. "No, Jason. Don't do this. He won't take my words into account if he decides what he wanted to do. He lifts the tree with his strong hands." I gave him a hand, but it wasn't necessary for him. We took that tree as defense and slowly approached the library. We walked for a distance and the stones stopped coming our way. We planted the tree again and stood helpless behind the police jeep. Jason was clever and loved adventures. But he hated being late in anything and never gave up. I'm his only companion and he takes me everywhere, whether it's a problem or fun. Again, Jason gave me a wild grin. This time I was happy that he had an idea. He saw a whirlpool under the jeep. "Drake, this is our only chance to escape the police and go into the library. Follow me," he said, and slowly crawled near the whirlpool. I crawled after him. He fell into the whirlpool and I prayed to all gods to return home, safe and sound. I fell into the whirlpool and it was just for a second. I flew out of the other whirlpool near Jason. "We did it," I said. "Yup, let's go in," he said and opened the large grilled gate of the library. We tiptoed into the flower-bedded garden. We heard the sound of footsteps and hid behind a tree. We slowly peeped onto the other side. There were two people, a man and a woman in my sight. He was thin and had brown hair. The woman was fat and had black hair. Something hit me. The door of my parents' room was locked outside. I slowly went near them and touched the woman. She opened her mouth to shout. But the man shut her mouth with his hands. "Mom. Dad. What are you doing here?" I whispered. "We came to submit the book," my dad whispered back. "What's the hurry?" I asked them. "Ask Jason," my mum said as she saw Jason standing behind me. "I'll tell you on the way, Drake," Jason said. The four of us marched to the stairs of the library. To my astonishment, there were hundreds of them waiting to submit the book. "What's the hurry?" I asked Jason again. "I'll tell you." My suspicion increased. I ran to a man standing in the row and asked him, "What's the hurry to submit the book today?" "Look at the board at the starting of the stairs." He pointed to a yellow-colored board. I rushed down and took a look at the board. It read, "The books are behaving badly on Magic Day. Please submit before 12 a.m. I thought, what? The people have no sense. How can books behave badly? And laughed. "You are fooled, Jason." "Nope. The librarian never lies," he told. I looked at my watch. It was 12 a.m. "Let's see what happens," I mocked at him. The book in his hand suddenly flew in the air. "Why did you throw the book up, Jason?" I asked. "I didn't do that, Drake," he said slowly. That's when I truly believed the librarian. All the books jumped and hovered in the air. "Surrender," they shouted in unison. All the people were scared and ran haywire. The books chased everybody and covered them with paper. One by one, they made the people surrender. Jason and I stood frozen. "Now do you understand why I wanted to submit it?" he asked. "Yes," I replied, giving him a helpless look. We stood there and surrendered ourselves. I wouldn't have been imprisoned by these bunch of books if I had just been quiet and followed the people. In a small, secluded village nestled deep within a dense forest, there was a legend whispered among the locals, a tale that chilled their bones and made their hearts race with fear. The legend spoke of a vengeful spirit known as the Wraith of Hollow Creek. According to the tale, long ago, a wicked sorcerer had resided in the village. He delved into dark arts, seeking ultimate power. But his malevolent actions eventually led to his demise at the hands of the villagers, who feared his growing influence. As he took his final breath, the sorcerer cursed the village, promising to return in a spectral form and unleash unimaginable terror. Years passed, and the villagers believed the curse to be nothing more than a cautionary tale. But one fateful night, when the moon was veiled by a sinister cloud, the nightmare became a reality. People began to vanish without a trace, leaving behind only eerie whispers and lingering fear. Rumors spread that the Wraith of Hollow Creek had awakened. It was said to take the form of a shadowy figure, draped in tattered robes, with glowing, malevolent eyes that pierced through the darkness. The Wraith possessed a chilling aura that froze the hearts of anyone unfortunate enough to encounter it. The village plunged into a state of terror. Doors were locked tight, and windows were barricaded, but the Wraith was relentless. It prowled the village at night, seeking souls to claim as its own. The villagers could hear its haunting wails echoing through the stillness, a harbinger of impending doom. One by one, the villagers fell victim to the Wraith's relentless pursuit. Families were torn apart, friendships shattered, and hope diminished with each passing night. Fear gripped the hearts of the survivors, who lived in constant dread of the Wraith's inevitable visit. But there was a glimmer of hope. Legends spoke of a hidden talisman, said to hold the power to banish the Wraith back to the depths of darkness from whence it came. Desperate to save their village, a small group of brave individuals embarked on a treacherous quest to find the talisman and put an end to the Wraith's reign of terror. Their journey led them deep into the heart of the Forbidden Forest, where malevolent creatures and twisted spirits lurked in every shadow. They faced unimaginable horrors, testing their will and resolve. The path grew treacherous, and their numbers dwindled, but they pressed on, driven by their determination to save their home. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they stumbled upon an ancient temple hidden amidst the gnarled trees. Inside, they discovered the talisman, an artifact glowing with an ethereal light. With trembling hands, they harnessed its power, knowing that their village's fate rested upon their success. Returning to the village, the group confronted the Wraith in a final, epic battle. The air crackled with electricity as the talisman's energy clashed with the dark power of the Wraith. The struggle was fierce, each side fighting for dominion over the other. In a blinding burst of light, the Wraith let out a blood-curdling scream as the talisman's power overwhelmed it. The malevolent spirit dissolved into the ether, vanishing forever. The village was free from its curse, and a collective sigh of relief washed over the survivors. From that day forward, the village learned the importance of unity and courage. They celebrated their victory, never forgetting the horrors they had faced. The tale of the Wraith of Hollow Creek became a cautionary legend, a reminder of the darkness that lurks in the shadows and the strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable evil.